Who do you think you're? You just a black judge. Two cops thought they were untouchable. They thought they could intimidate, harass, and humiliate a black man on a lonely highway. They mocked him. They tore through his car. They shoved money into his hand, thinking he would stay silent, thinking he was powerless. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, was that the man they tried to bribe was the very judge who would one day decide their fate. This is not just a story, this is humiliation turned into justice. This is arrogance crushed by truth. Before we dive in, smash that subscribe button right now, turn on the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from because this story, it's more real, more raw, and more unforgettable than anything you've ever heard. Now, let's begin. His name was Judge Anthony Miles, a man forged not in privilege, but in fire. Raised in the shadows of Detroit's forgotten blocks, his mother worked her fingers raw just to keep food on the table. Poverty was loud. Violence was louder. But louder than both was the steady rhythm of Anthony's determination. He refused to let broken surroundings write the story of his life. From the cracked sidewalks where he first learned discipline, to the dusty shelves of the library where he devoured every book he could carry, Anthony built himself brick by brick. By the time he graduated law school, he was no longer the boy fighting against the odds. He was the man rewriting them. And years later, as a federal judge, Anthony carried himself with quiet thunder, calm, steady, unshakable. But that night on a storm-soaked highway, far from the courtroom, all of that authority was stripped away. All they saw was his skin. The rain was merciless, hammering the windshield in sheets of silver as Anthony pulled into a desolate rest stop. His shoulders ached from hours of driving, but his posture remained upright, disciplined. He stepped out, adjusting his tailored suit, his briefcase secure in his grip. But in the shadows, they waited. Two officers, leaning against their cruiser, their eyes sharp with suspicion, their bodies heavy with entitlement, they spotted him instantly. In their gaze, he wasn't a man returning from a long night. He was a target. Their boots struck the wet pavement as they closed in. Their presence was suffocating, their words sharp, slicing into his dignity. They circled him like wolves, tearing through his belongings, scattering his documents into the puddles, smudging the carefully kept files he carried. Every move was calculated humiliation. The sting of their arrogance cut deeper than the rain. They treated his silence as weakness, his composure as guilt. They didn't care who he was. To them, he was just another black man, faceless, voiceless, disposable. And then came the bribe. One officer smirked as he pulled out a folded stack of bills, waving it as if it were a leash. He extended it with the confidence of someone who had done this before, certain that money could bury the truth, that silence could be bought cheap. But Anthony did not reach for it. He did not bend. He stood like a monument in the storm, his gaze fixed, his silence louder than their threats. That night, he absorbed every insult, every humiliation, and he stored it deep inside, not as anger, but as evidence. Days passed. For the officers, it was routine. Another night. Another man degraded, another bribe offered and laughed about later, but they did not know the storm they had unleashed. When the charges of misconduct, corruption, and abuse of power finally landed at their feet, they shrugged it off. Their uniforms still gave them confidence. Their badges still gave them illusion. They believed they would skate through the system like they always had. But on the day of the trial, their arrogance cracked. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the bailiff's command rang out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Anthony Miles." The trial stretched for days, but the humiliation stretched further. What unfolded inside that courtroom was not just a legal proceeding. It was a dismantling of arrogance piece by piece, brick by brick, until nothing remained but shame. Every piece of evidence laid bare was not just a fact on paper. It was a mirror reflecting the ugliness of their corruption, the abuse of their power, the mockery they had made of the badge they wore. Every testimony rang like thunder in the quiet halls, each word a nail hammered deep into the coffin of their arrogance. The very system they thought they controlled was now turning against them with merciless precision. And through it all, Judge Miles remained steady. He did not gloat, though he had every reason to. He did not smile at their downfall, though humiliation dripped from every corner of the room. He sat tall, calm, unwavering, embodying justice not as vengeance, but as truth. His silence carried more weight than their excuses, his dignity heavier than their badges. For him, this was never about revenge. Revenge is fleeting, it burns hot and fades, but truth endures. He wanted the world to see that arrogance has limits, that a uniform cannot shield corruption forever, and that dignity, even when stripped, mocked, and stomped on, has the power to rise again. Higher, stronger, untouchable. Their humiliation was complete. Their downfall was absolute. And justice, once delayed, had arrived in the most poetic form imaginable. This story is not just about one judge or two corrupt cops. No, it is bigger than that. It is about every single moment when arrogance thinks it can silence dignity. It is about every time corruption tries to bury truth in darkness. And it is about the unstoppable force of justice that always finds a way to rise, unshaken, unbroken, unstoppable. The courtroom that day was more than four walls. It became a stage where arrogance was exposed, where corruption was stripped bare, and where dignity reclaimed its rightful throne. And let this be a lesson carried far beyond those walls. Humiliation may sting, but it does not last. Corruption may rise, but it always falls. And justice always returns to claim its seat. If this story shook you to the core, don't just watch and leave. Smash that subscribe button right now. Turn on the bell so you never miss another powerful story. And comment where you're watching from, because we want to know how far this message will travel. And share this story with someone who still believes arrogance wins. Share it with someone who thinks power means untouchable. Share it with someone who doubts that truth always prevails. Because this is proof. This is testimony. This is reality. Remember this: humiliation doesn't last. Arrogance doesn't win. But justice never sleeps. Justice always rises. Justice always returns to take its rightful seat.